you, science is agreed that unless something is done and done quickly, man, as the dominant species of life on Earth, will be extinct within a year.
Yes, cities, nations, even civilization itself, threatened with annihilation because nature, mad, rampant, wrought its most awesome creation. For born in that swirling inferno of radioactive dust were things so horrible, so terrifying, so hideous. There is no word to describe them.
Hurricanes, heavy storms, tornadoes, floods, and similar disasters can lead to problems with a variety of insects and other creepy crawlies. With 2 broods of cicadas emerging and bugs in the news, we talk today with Paul Bello, entomologist extraordinaire. Paul has been battling bugs and creepy crawlies for decades. As the rains and floodwaters abate, these pests become unwelcome guests in and around our homes and disrupt the response and recovery to an event. It's fascinating how nature's smallest creatures can become such significant challenges. Paul's insights are invaluable for dealing with these post-event pest issues, and his stories provide both practical advice and a touch of humor. Some of these insects can be very persistent and invasive, but hey, don't let that bug you. Listen on. I'm Kevin Peterson. Welcome to Weather Heroes. Today we are joined by Paul Bello. Paul is an entomologist. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm well, sir. Thank you. So, Paul, entomology is a very interesting career. So tell us what entomology is and what got you interested in entomology.
Entomology is the study of insects. And what got me interested in entomology is a very practical matter. What happened was I decided I'm going to go to college. So I enrolled in the biology department, and I was interested in aquatic studies, marine biology. But everyone who enrolled in the bio department had to take a course called Topics in Bio 101. People would come in from different disciplines in biology and talk about these disciplines and career potential and all those kinds of things. I thought I wanted to be like Jacques Cousteau because, remember on television,
of
you
course.
saw Jacques Cousteau.
Yeah.
And yes, and as the Calypso dock said Galapagos, kind of thing. I'm like, wow, that looks really cool. I want to do that. One Monday morning, this gentleman is there to teach us his 1 hour, talk to us. Dr. Fishman started his presentation with a brown paper lunch bag. He told everybody he has cookies in this bag, and he's going to sell cookies to us. And the first cookie sold for $0.05. And the last cookie, I forget how much it sold for, but it was over $1. He explained to us that I just taught you the law of supply and demand. Now, why was that relevant to me? And I'll tell you. You have to remember, first of all, back in the day, minimum wage was about $1.75 an hour. And one kid paid, let's say, $1.15 or $1.25 for one cookie. So that was a lot of money for one cookie. Secondly, I was paying for my own college. So what he told us was, I taught you the law of supply and demand, and my program is pest control technology. And if you come into my program, you will I can get you a job, or you can get a job in the pest control industry as a technician right now for $10 an hour. So as soon as that class was over, I went down there and spoke with him and switched my major immediately and had a job doing that work, making good money. I thought I wanted to be like Marcus Welby. Remember the doctor, the small town doctor, and go to, and entomology is a good pre-med major. That's how I got in entomology.
Okay.
And from there, I transferred to University of Georgia and got my Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Entomology. Okay. So I've been working in pest control and pest management since 1976.
So you've got decades of experience in these things, literally.
Decades. If you do the math, it's going on 48 years now.
Yep.
Right. It's a long time. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot of time studying bugs. So when we talk and say the word bugs or insects, there's obviously other things besides the scientific definition of insects. There's arthropods, which I think include centipedes and spiders and such. Tell us what all the different types of creepy crawlies there are actually out there.
We deal with all kinds of pests. So anything from ants to termites, and from, mice, rats, birds, snakes, all kinds of critters. In fact, if it's defined as a pest, chances are I've worked on it somewhere, and I get to go to really cool places. I've inspected the White House, the Walter Reed Hospital, the Smithsonian, the Pentagon. I get to go to really cool places, and I see a lot of cool stuff.
So, obviously we're weather heroes, and you are one of our weather heroes, Paul, as you deal with a lot of the weather-created scenarios involving bugs, some of those potentially dangerous. But what are some of the, potential dangerous scenarios or bugs that you might see after a storm, after a flood in particular? There's challenges like standing water, there's wet debris afterwards, even sometimes leaked sewage and such. So talk to us about the types of challenges that we would find after that.
Okay. On the danger side, the world's most dangerous animal is the mosquito. And people don't realize that there's about, I guess on average each day about 1 million people die from malaria. And that usually happens. It's usually the very young or the very old in third world countries. So you don't see that on television every day, but that's true. People die from malaria all the time. We're lucky here in the United States. We don't have a lot of malaria cases. Once in a while, they break out. After a storm, like a big hurricane or something like that, you're going to have a lot of rainfall. You're going to have a lot of water and standing water, and that helps mosquitoes to breed, and it produces more and more mosquitoes. So in the United States, we have encephalitis outbreaks because of mosquitoes. Once in a while, you'll hear about a malaria case. But the mosquito is the most dangerous thing that's happening right now. And that happens because you asked in relation to storms. The other thing that happens in relation to storms, especially across the Southeast, are the red imported fire ant. What happens with fire ants is when you have a lot of water, people who live in the South see those mounds of the fire ant nests, and all that dirt that's piled up is the soil that's been excavated from their nest. And they pile that up, and that mound serves a purpose. But when those grounds get flooded, the fire ants will ball up. That means they hold on to each other. They get the like the Titanic went under, save the men, women, and children, right? Well, they lock onto each other. They grab the larvae and the pupae, which is the developing young ones, and they'll float. These balls of ants will float. And then if they come up against your building or near your building, now you have danger of fire ants. And, fire ants are hymenoptera. They're related to bees and wasps and hornets, and they have venomous stings. And fire ants kill people every year. So that's a danger. Fire ants can come into people's homes. They can come into hospitals and sting patients. And it's relatively common that people get, stung by fire ants, and it's relatively common that fire ants sting and kill X number of people on average each year in the United States. So that's a dangerous thing. Maybe not so weather related, but we have other pests that are vectors of disease, like let's say the Lone Star tick is here in Georgia now. And if anybody doesn't know, and the Lone Star tick spreads this disease which causes an allergic reaction. You get bit by that tick and it spreads alpha-gal to you. You can't eat red meat. And that can last for years for a person who has that. And it can develop within you within a couple weeks or a few weeks or a year later after you were bit by that tick. And gosh, that's dangerous, because it's summertime now. People are going out, they like to go camping and hiking and all those kinds of things, and fishing and hunters and stuff. They get exposed to these ticks, they get bit. That could be a problem. That could be a problem also related to weather, because you have all these rescue workers that are going down to these places where, let's say, like a Hurricane Katrina hit and stuff, and these vectors are all present there. Those are the things that we have to watch out for.
So we've got more ticks escaping flood waters. We've got ants floating on top of the water. We've also got mosquitoes who are hanging out and breeding in standing water. That's probably going to be just a few days after that they start reproducing there. But we've also got a lot of spiders that'll kind of get washed out, and now they're hanging out in some of that debris. I know there's a lot of hornets and other sneaking insects that have burrows that they'll get flooded out, and they'll be flying around looking for a place. So there's a lot of other, I guess, critters out there trying to survive as well.
Yeah, that happens. Do people get bit by spiders? Yes, it's kind of uncommon because spiders they're predatory animals and they're feeding generally on stuff that's smaller than them. A human gets bit by a spider, that's unusual because it's an interaction that shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does because people are exposed to this. Wasps and hornets, for the most part, their nests are elevated. Of course, you have yellow jackets that are where their nests are built in the ground. They burrow and create these nests in hollows and such. But the primary, most dangerous one, we've already hit on with mosquitoes, because mosquitoes, depending on which species it is, they have different breeding habits. You have floodwater mosquitoes that are waiting for the floodwaters to happen, and you'll have, believe it or not, female mosquitoes know where there's going to be a puddle, and they'll lay their eggs, and those eggs will sit there and wait until the next rainstorm, and the area that's a low area where the puddle forms then become exposed to the aquatic environment, and then they hatch and they breed in that floodwater. You have others that are breeding in, people have stocked up gutters and stuff, and female mosquitoes lay the eggs up there. And then you have the regular type of mosquitoes that you just find common bodies of water and stagnant water and all those kind of things that we talked about. But it's like Mother Nature created a mosquito for every situation, much to the detriment of man. Sad thing is, or the bad news is, that they can fly great distance from where they bred, where the eggs were laid and the larvae developed. And now you're getting bit by mosquitoes because there was a hurricane or stuff. And these hurricanes and bad weather and storms give rise to the large mosquito populations. You have mosquito controlled districts in different states that are out there testing the water and making larval counts and all that kind of stuff, so that they know when they have to go out and actually do preventative sprays to help keep down encephalitis and things like that.
So with all these potential dangers from these creepy crawlies and mosquitoes and everything else, how can folks best avoid getting bit or stung, or maybe it's just unavoidable?
Well, it is avoidable, and we have to do some preventative actions. I mean, think about it. We have all these repellents. Of course, DEET is probably the most popular and one of the most efficacious. Some people are averse to putting chemicals on their own bodies, and that's understandable. But wearing long sleeves, long pants, which is hard to do in the hot weather, helps. Wearing the right colors of the clothing helps. It depends on which mosquito species you're talking about, and people can online search these kinds of things. There's a thermocell that these are electric type things, and I think you like them. We have them there. You put this product in this thermocell unit and you light it and or turn on the electricity, and it sends out a chemical vapor to protect you from mosquitoes and repel mosquitoes in, let's say 10 to 15 foot radius. Hunters, fishermen use them. We have them here for when we're in the backyard. The other thing that people have to understand about mosquitoes is they can't fly well in a breeze of about 3 to 5 miles an hour or greater. So if you're sitting there, you don't want to get bit by mosquitoes, you don't want to put chemicals on yourself, just maybe set up a fan so that you're in the air wash of the fan. And the mosquito can't get you because you're being protected by the moving air. Perfect. So there's that as well. The other thing is, depending on which species it is, most mosquitoes tend to bite at dawn and dusk. There are daytime biters here in Georgia and other parts of the world. So mosquitoes tend to be along the ecotone, which is like, where the lawn meets the shrubbery and the trees, where the field, if you're out, let's say in a farm area where the field meets the woods, that marginal area where the terrain and the fauna in the terrain changes from, let's say, the grassland to the shrubs to the trees, that's the ecotone. And that's where you're going to find the most ticks, the most mosquitoes, possibly the most fleas and things like that, all these ectoparasite things. Why? Because in nature, that's where the action is. That's where most of the animals are. Their transportation routes and travel paths are along those ways. So if you want to get bit by mosquitoes, hang around along the ecotone and stay in the shade because that's where they are. Okay. Go out in the hot sun where no one wants to be. Mosquitoes are subject to desiccation from the hot sun. So they don't want to be out there. So you might be out there out in the middle of on the lawn out of the shade, and you're going to get bit by, you're not going to get bit by mosquitoes, but the guy hanging out in his hammock in the shade, he's going to get bit by mosquitoes. So that's something else to think about as well.
Well, so in all your work over the years, Paul, what is one of the worst infestations or cases that you've seen that you'd like to share?
Okay, well, I have, and I'm aware of people getting stung to death by fire ants in their own hospital beds. That's horrific. And how does that happen? Well, the fire ants, people have to understand how, ants are, and I forget, one of the studios made a movie called Ants. And ants are a colony. The workers and the foragers that you see crawling around, commonly they're all females. They travel and communicate with each other via chemical messages called pheromones. And they can travel great distances. And the job of these foragers is to go out and find food resource that's acceptable for the colony to support the colony. And then they'll lay these forage trail pheromones down to tell their nestmates or colony mates, hey, over here is where this food is. And they'll go to it. Well, what happens in these hospital cases I've told you about is that you have patients that are in their beds and they have IV lines. They'll have maybe they have sucrose in those lines or whatever, to feed them and keep them going. Well, sometimes those lines leak, and the fire ants are good at finding those things. And maybe the patient wakes up and starts swatting the ants crawling on their arm, feeding on the leaking sugar solution. And these ants are adept at protecting themselves. So they'll send out what we call an attack pheromone, and the ants will start stinging this person. And, it's sad, but you can Google this and see how people have been stung to death by fire ants because of that kind of thing.
Wow.
So that's one of the worst things that I've seen in all these years.
I think that's pretty bad. Thinking you're in a hospital room and you're safe in your hospital bed, and then you're attacked by a bunch of ants. So Paul,
that would be horrible, right?
I would think so. That would be another horror movie all by itself. Any final words of wisdom for the listeners regarding what types of insects that they might see are the best protective methods, or just words of advice?
Okay, so I'll give you a couple things. One is, because of mosquitoes and ticks are, they're serious. The disease threat from them is serious. We'll talk about mosquitoes. First of all, be aware and considerate of that you're in mosquito country and how to prevent getting bit by mosquitoes. I told you a little bit about the fan. You can use repellents, the different type of clothing, long sleeves and stuff are important. Those thermocell type devices and other repellent candles and things like that, use those things. Try to avoid being in the areas where mosquitoes are, in the shady areas, and dawn and dusk type thing. Ticks. Boy, some of the diseases that ticks spread are very, very serious. So you want to avoid them. There's certain repellents that are effective on ticks. If you're going out on hiking and camping trips, you have to check yourself because, here's something that people don't know about ticks. The first instar, newly emerged from the egg-sized ticks, are tiny. People call them seed ticks, and they're about the size of like a dot, for the period on a printed page. They're very small, hard to see. So you have to check yourself very thoroughly and be aware of that, because if you don't, and one of the things that's very common in the United States is Lyme disease. It's named for Lyme, Connecticut, where it was first discovered. But there, people get Lyme disease all the way down here in the Southeast and all the way across the Midwest now. So, and it's horrific. And how does that happen? The tick gets on the person and is allowed to feed for a certain period of time because it was undiscovered. And had that been discovered and the tick was removed before that happened, because it takes a while for it to transmit the disease. It takes a while for the feeding behavior. So that's something to have to watch out for. Fire ants, you know what? Fire ants are a known hazard. And we can see the mounds and be considerate of the mounds, but are you going to kill all the fire ants on your lawn? Let's say you live on 10 acres or something like that. That's cost preventative to do, but you need to be aware of the ones that are near the house. And, like in a schoolyard, let's say, the kids are going down the slide or they're on the swings, and at the bottom of that slide or near the swings is a fire ant now that kids could inadvertently step in or something. Well, that's the one you have to go out and take care of right now, right? The ones that are away from the structure where hardly anybody's you can put the baits out or whatever and see if those products work and take care of them that way. Let's see, what else? You asked about spiders, those Joro spiders. I don't know if you've heard of those, but, they're from Southeast Asia and they're an invasive species. The problem with them is they were in the news earlier this week. And they say, oh, flying spiders. Well, they don't literally fly, but they do something called balloon. And what that means is they let silk out and let the wind blow them while they're on that silk thread, and they spread that way, depending on which way the wind's blowing, how strong the wind is, and the age of those and the size of the spiders. So their silk is a lot stronger than the average spider, and people walk through it, and if you've ever walked through a spider web before, while you're out, some people are horrified by that, but it's a pain in the neck type thing. But their silk is way stronger than the average spider, and one of the ways we stop those guys is when we see their nests starting, just take those things down. In our industry, we have something we call it a webster. It's like this extendable, like you see for people painting. And it looks like a big Q-tip brush on the end. We use that, and you get it in the spider web and spin it, and it tangles up all the webbing and stuff, and then you dump it in the trash or whatever, and it helps knock them down. Because for every one of those little cottony, fuzzy-looking things that you see that's an egg nest, there could be 300 to 500 spiders in there. So you want to get rid of those things. Around our house, we don't have Joro spiders because I do that. I take them out as I see them, and I try to teach other people to do that as well. So the people who don't have a lot of spider problems. And one of the other things that happens when we have these, as a result of a storm, we could have, one of the things you talked about earlier was like sewage and stuff happens because the sewer system and the pipe system sometimes fail. We're talking about sewer failures and stuff as a result of storms and stuff. And when you think about this, let's say we have a 6-inch sewer pipe. Well, that pipe is not full of sewage, 100%. It's probably 20 or 25%, it's at the bottom. And in that pipe, hanging in upside down, are American cockroaches. So that's a common place to find them, and they'll crawl up into people's houses. They get through the traps. They can literally sometimes crawl up through a toilet, even though it has water in it, because insects are built different than us. And when you have a big storm and a lot of buildings get torn down, because sometimes in these storms, like these big hurricanes, it spawns tornadoes as well. So the buildings get torn down, the pipes get messed up, and now you have cockroaches or you have rodents. So of course we don't want any of those roaches around us because they're living and breeding in filthy areas, and they mechanically transmit diseases. There's different pathogens that you're going to find in those sewer pipes and stuff. And when people ask me, well, what does a mechanical transmission mean? I explain it this way. Let's say you're walking around you get invited to your friend's house, and they have a big dog or even a small dog, and they don't pick up after it, and you are out there walking around on the lawn, and you step in it by accident, and they have white carpet, and you don't know it, and you walk in the house. That's mechanical transmission. The roaches are walking through that stuff, and then they walk across your food and stuff. That's why we don't want roaches in a restaurant or whatever, because they walk all over the place, and they're transmitting and leaving little presents behind where there could be fecal contamination and different diseases and stuff that are in those materials. So that's problematic.
Okay.
Yes. I told you I get to see a lot of stuff. Of course, you have rodents, and when the landscape gets disturbed, these rodents have their nest sites and travel paths and all that kind of stuff, and they get disturbed. Sometimes what we commonly see in my business is when they're building a new building and they're tearing down this, all the trees and fauna and stuff in a lot, all of a sudden rats are running all over the place. Why? Because the bulldozers and stuff are disturbing where they live naturally. And so that can happen in storms as well. So what do we want to do if we're trying to prevent being exposed to these things? Well, let's make sure that in our homes that our doors and windows close and sealed properly, that we have screens on our windows and those types of things, and there's no gaps and stuff in the walls of our house on the exterior where these animals can get in, and we have to seal those things with caulk and stuff. So I hope that helps you guys.
I think that
anything
helps a lot. Paul, I tell you what, those are great final observations. A little disgusting, but that's right on par, when we're talking about creepy crawlies and such. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, your knowledge, and I'm certain that as our audience listens to this, they're going to be washing their hands quite a bit and making sure all the holes in their houses are closed.
I tell people in our industry, look, the good news is as long as there's bugs, we'll always have a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm happy to help the general public, for free, because it's hard to get credible and accurate information. And I started a page on Facebook called Bedbug Practical, and that's primarily for people who are bedbug victims, because you go on vacation and you stay at a hotel or someplace that maybe has bedbugs and you don't know it, and then you bring them home. My God, that can be a nightmare. So things like that. Of course, termites and other things are big problems for people, and that happens all the time. So I'm easy to find. I have a YouTube channel. I have my website and stuff.
What is your website? What address?
Okay, so my website is pjbpestconsultant.com, and anybody can Google online. They could just search Paul Bello bedbug videos, Paul Bello mosquito videos, or Paul Bello pest articles or something like that. I mean, I've been in this industry a long time. I have videos that have been seen over 1 million times.
Wow.
So, yeah, I guess I'm lucky to still be doing this work. I don't see me retiring anytime soon, much to the chagrin of Mary Ann. But, I mean, I figure if I don't work every day, what am I going to do?
It sounds like you're having fun, though, too. So
I have fun doing what I do. Yes, sir.
Paul, thank you very much for giving us some of your time. Thank you, okay? Appreciate that, buddy.
All right. No worries, Kevin. Take care. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.